Hey, Randy, how are you?
Excellent. How you doing, PB?
Great to see you. Happy summer.
Happy summer to you. And yesterday was a big day. I think it was your birthday, right?
Yes, thank you, Randy. Had a great day. I was with my kids in Boston, went to the Red Sox game. It was quite hot, but the Red Sox, they're on a nice winning streak. So we had a great night at Fenway.
Awesome. That's great. Great seats you have there too.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So Randy, it's great to see you. You were nice enough to send me a copy of your book, which I know we'll talk about, your go-to sales advisor, but maybe just tell us a little bit about, you started Sales Community last year, and talk a little about what sort of was the genesis of that. What's it all about? How's it going?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Really appreciate it. And as you might remember, you were kind of one of the first dominoes that got me going. You had a Captivate IQ that you thought could use my help with some CRO introductions. And then we got talking. You said, geez, you've been doing all this work helping companies sell to CIOs and CTOs and partner with the different vendors and OEMs and ISVs. Why don't you do that for sales folks or for the sales community? And that was just a monster aha. And then following our discussions, which again, I'm really appreciative for, then I talked to a lot of other, probably over 200 of our CRO and CEO friends, and really found that there is a real need for a enterprise B2B site community where people can learn more and can sell more. So we're really excited. It has some fantastic content. Definitely encourage everybody to go check it out.
And how did, the network you've built over your career, and then now you've sort of put that together, I guess, more formally in the sales community, and it's great to be part of that. How did you then come up with the idea of taking all of that, the sort of the network, the knowledge, the best practice, and putting that into a book?
Yeah, great. And on the advisory board, which people can see on the site, I think there's over 200. I've not counted them lately, but over probably 250 or 260. Great folks like you. So definitely encourage people to check out that impressive list. But on the book was really Tony Jeary, who's my great co-author, and he'd been after me forever. And I was visiting with him last year down in July, vetting through Sales Community, and he kept hitting me over the head and said, "Hey, let's do this book." So kind of one thing led to another, and ended up coming out, and it's literally printing as we speak. Should be available to ship next week. We'll be on Amazon, but we have a landing page, which you can see here, salescommunity.com/book. So we encourage people to go there to get it.
Awesome. And maybe talk about who should read the book, Randy?
Yeah, so I'd say really, you could say anybody in sales or anybody who wants to know about sales, but it's specifically catered to individual contributors on up to leadership. So SDRs all the way on up to CROs and CEOs. But if you're in finance operations, any functional field, and you want to know more tips and tricks about sales, would be great for them as well.
Right, because I saw, I know many of the people who contribute to the book. It really is amazing, Randy. But it's even, like you said, it's salespeople, but it's all the way up to CEOs who are, who have, I think, contributed to the book. Was there any, maybe we'll get into a few specifics, but any common takeaways that you saw in putting the book together?
I think everybody just has fantastic nuggets, which you can see in there. There's themes around value selling, culture, partnering, sales process, personal development, but just a whole bunch of what I'd call sales 101, tactics and tips and tricks. Relationships and networking is a big one that comes up as well. But really just interesting. I originally thought of trying to categorize and have people do funnel them into different areas in terms of categories, but I just said, hey, do whatever you want. And I think it's a really good, diverse view of several great topics.
Yeah. Well, I know you've done so much in your career, Randy, but I believe this is your first book, so congrats. What did you learn that maybe, because I think you and I try to be lifelong learners. But what did you learn by putting together the book?
So a lot from just a basic sales perspective is, you can, probably never hear it enough in terms of a lot of the basics that you need to do. But I think more importantly, at a higher level, just kind of reinforcing around just the value of kind of relationships, what you're really doing for your own, personal development in terms of what you can do and how you can do it. And then Tony's got a lot of great sections that are just kind of just more general, overall personal, growth and development.
Yeah. Any favorite, I don't want to put you on the spot, but any favorite part of the book for you?
Yeah. Well, one was one of the reasons I want to do this is, I like you have, several old school manila folders full of content. And I always said before I die, I wanted to have the information posted somewhere. So my favorite part is now, at least in terms of any wisdom I can pass on, now I can die, if that's not too morbid of a thought. But I'd say, all the parts are favorite, but specifically the Walter Brown section. Walter Brown, as you remember, early on EMC was a sales consultant that really, taught us so much. We're a bunch of, hot dog renegades, cowboys, whatever you want to call it, and really helped to teach us a lot of great things around sales process and methodology and how to do it and what to do it. And I can't thank his wife, Sarah, enough for allowing me the opportunity to carry his words and wisdom on. Mike Rutgers, who as well, calls Walter I think he's the father, the godfather of direct selling.
Yeah, no, it was so nice, Rennie, to see you incorporate Walter's books into your book. And Walter had such a profound influence and impact on many of us and on EMC and many other companies. I think one of the things for me, and when I was reading your book and then seeing the excerpt from Walter, was Walter made me really proud to be a salesperson. And it also made me very proud to be part of the kind of the team we had at EMC in even a deeper way. So it was really nice, and it brought back so many good memories. Is there anything specific? And I know some people will maybe haven't had exposure to Walter's books. They will once they get your book. But is there anything like around what Walter did, what he wrote for you, that would be a thing you would want to train, kind of say, if there's one thing for a young salesperson to take away from Walter's work and his life journey, what would that be?
Yeah. So in the book, I should have said before, so it's viewed, my view is it's something that you actually kind of tag and mark up and paperclip or whatever. So I just kind of go direct. There's a lot of great sections. There's so one of his handbooks, as you know, is for reps. Another one is for sales leaders. And some excerpts I just kind of pull out here, but one that's for leaders or reps, that in order to be successful, you need a playable hand, including these 7 cards. So you think about a healthy marketplace, a competitive offering, enough territory, good compensation plans, supportive management, realistic goals, and enough time. And if you think through, a lot of people that will call me for coaching, hey, I'm looking at opportunity, and I'll always pull it open and say, okay, let's compare and see how it works against those. And you could really say, if it doesn't have, if you're not going to have a good comp plan, if you don't have supportive management, any of them, then that's really, not good to do. And then a couple other snippets for reps is negotiating your quota well, which, at the end of the day, you get measured on how you exceed goal and exceed quota. And that's something that I think, reps, and especially, younger reps really take for granted. And then, if you look at inspecting deals, three great tidbits. Why do it now, and why with you? And several of us, over the years, have really taken those words to heart.
Yeah, I think kind of just your 2 examples there from Walter. The simplicity of Walter's thoughts is always amazing, but the importance of them, and I think, and maybe talk around that framework of the hand. Why do so many people get it wrong as they're evaluating a company to join or their role in the company? What is it that people miss, and they don't get it right? Maybe they don't get it right for, in some cases, their whole career.
Yep. I mean, it might be an odd analogy, but a lot of times I'll say it's like buying a house, right? You look at the house and you get the inspection and something comes back in the inspection and you kind of just look the other way just because you really want the house. But I think a lot of times people either want the company or they want the job. Jennifer Haas, I don't know if she's listening or not, but she had a not so good experience, she'll admit, with her, I guess, 2 companies ago. And, it's really kind of making sure that you really can be objective and you can be true to yourself, that you're just not jumping for some opportunity, but you really kind of make sure that you are really set up for success.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I think for me, it was around when I take all of Walter's, kind of work, both in the book and then the impact that Walter had on me, was really around this idea of continuous improvement. I mean, I always, like, whenever I was with Walter or reread the book, it was, how do I do better? How do I, and this dovetails to another friend that we shared in common, Bill Campbell. It was around streamlining your work, your life, so that you could be super successful. It was around the people, understanding your product, understanding your customers, all those things. So, your book forced me to reread and rethink a few things. So I appreciate that. And maybe as I kind of scrolled again this morning, Randy, talk a little bit about all the people. You have so many incredible people in your life, but that contribute to the book. So maybe talk a little bit about the importance of the relationships you've had in your career and how they've impacted you, and maybe a few nuggets for others, particularly younger people in their career, that could take away from sort of the importance of building and fostering and nurturing relationships.
Sure. So Ken Doherty, and amongst several of us, I'll keep echoing Walter's words, but it's I think know me, like me, trust me. So I think a lot of people of the younger generation these days think, oh, relationship is just kind of old school buddy, but I think it's really it's the trusting, it's over time, being able to be trusted, that you're going to be able to deliver on what you say and how you do it. Dave Donatelli in the book, gives an example. He was on a sales call at HP Oracle, I believe, and he didn't remember he had met the person before. And in the middle of the sales call, they had, I guess, said something to the CXO that was there and said, "Oh, you remember Dave was the one that fixed XYZ problem for us back when he was at EMC." So it's kind of that relationship building isn't just necessarily buddy, but it's really kind of making sure that they trust and know that you're going to deliver for them, if that makes sense. But relationships over time, and I guess it ties in a little bit with networking, and you're fantastic with relationships as well.
Yeah, I was just looking. Someone, a good friend of both of ours, just chatted on the LinkedIn. He said Ken 𝐒𝐲𝐬, who I go back to my college days with at Boston College, he says he'll treasure mine and yours advice. I've always treasured Kenny's advice. So I think it's like you said, Randy, it's really a two-way street, and these relationships are so important. I think professionally, they're also important because it makes you enjoy your work more. I mean, work should be, I know they call it work, but I always tell my kids this, I have a blast at work. Because I think for me, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Randy, there's really very little separation. I mean, you're living your life, and work is a big component of your life, just like your family's a big component, your relationships, your spouse, other loved ones. But it's really, I've always really loved the people I work with. And maybe talk a little bit about enjoying your life's work.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's really all about. And just in the bottom, before we miss it, so Kenny, thanks, and also acknowledge Kenny has some great contributions in the book as well. Aaron Mills, who had mentioned streamlining previously, he's actually, we have them sorted alphabetically. So Aaron obviously is the first one up. He's got a great write-up on selling into the SMB space. and Eric Coe, likewise a contributor. So thanks for the comments there, Eric. And what was the question?
No, I was just, well, I guess you're kind of just mentioning those three folks, but just maybe a little bit around maybe what should people do, like coming out of school, their first 5 years. I saw your daughter, Shannon, had a nice quote on your website, and maybe someone who's, she's a couple years into her career. What are you telling her about, building these relationships and the importance of these relationships?
Yeah, we actually were, I want to talk out of school. We're talking about it the other night. I think in the jobs that you have, what are those relationships that you are nurturing that you're going to be able to, I hate to use the word leverage, but from a sales perspective, use and leverage, 10, 20 years down the road. So as you're looking in, for other people, as you're looking in jobs and what you're going to do, how are you going to do it? What's that going to do? If there's a, company that's, in the industrial space and is selling to paint manufacturers, most folks listening to this probably aren't going to want to be in that space. If it's something that's selling, so I've been very fascinated by the whole sales and marketing tech space as we've been talking about. So if you think about, okay, if you're in the sales and marketing tech space and you're going to be selling to CROs, CMOs, enablement people, and you're going to do that job today, that's something the next 5, 10, 20 years, those are relationships that you can really, nurture and leverage and really enjoy.
Well, Renee, maybe talk, as I think about relationships, but maybe comment a little bit on this. And I was reflecting, I was reading Peter McKay in terms of kind of self-awareness he talked about. But when you have these relationships, but it's business, how do you have the tough conversations with people that are important to you, but maybe where they're not delivering, they're not making their number, they're not making the impact, and they're people you care about. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, we had I think we're taught early on at EMC, it was, I think, that much on the one hand harder, but it was easier. I mean, a lot of us were friends. So I think in cases where you're friends, you kind of owe it to them to be all the more open and forthcoming. So I think regardless, whatever your relationship is, you need to be giving the feedback all the time. It's not an annual performance appraisal process or anything else. It's all the time. So example, when I was at HP and I'd go on sales calls and I'd ask the rep or whoever, hey, do you have any feedback for me? And they were shocked that any exec would ask that. And sometimes they may or may not have said anything. And then I'll say to them, can I give you some feedback? And I learned those words somewhere, but by saying, can I give you some feedback, that allows the person to be open to knowing I'm going to hear something. I may or may not like it, but hey, my body, I'm going to be ready to hear it. But the point is that it just has to be something that's all the time. So it can't be, it's nothing formal, but if you can kind of break the ice and culturally get around that, I would have, sales kickoffs with, thousands of people. And I'd say, okay, turn to the person to your right and say, can I give you some feedback? And just get people used to that. And that should be something that people do. A manager certainly should be able to doing to their people, but individual contributor or a person should be able to also say that on up to their manager. And you just need to have that culture of open feedback and communication, which I'm sure you agree with.
Yeah, totally. I know we're getting some questions. We've gotten some questions in the chat and some nice comments. I saw one earlier a few minutes ago from Dan Doherty, who I have the fondest memories of working together in Columbus, Ohio. And what I'm just thinking about some of your comments, Randy, and thinking about someone like Dan Doherty is, customers loved working with him, and I think we had some great products at EMC. But, it's still a human business. And so it's great to see some of these folks and some of the chats and questions, coming in. Maybe there's a couple you want to touch on, Randy.
Yeah, likewise. So, Dan, thanks. I think he's in Europe now, but he's been really successful executive. And then, Phil Walton, who was just there, is CEO of a really cool company, RT Core, and says great leaders give honest feedback on everything. that will enhance people around them. And it's really, great point, Phil, but I think it's really, setting that example. So, even if it's an SDR, on a Zoom with another SDR talking about anything, they likewise should be able to, kind of have that and do it, which I always, we spoke, it's hard in this whole Zoom and virtual world and everything else, not having that human contact. So I think leaders really need to, lean in that much more about this.
How are things changing, Randy? I mean, we've been in this, I'll call it tech sales for, 35, 36 years, give or take. But how do you see things, because you're working with so many companies, early stage companies, growth stage companies, how are things changing, or how have they changed?
So I think on the one hand, I think a lot of things have stayed the same around, making sure that you're, I'll focus on the sales aspect, but you need to have leads. So whether you're cold calling or leveraging through your marketing, lead gen engine there, you have to make sure you've got a good pipeline and make sure you're doing all proposals. As you're talking to people, you need to have, kind of the old, value selling that we've done forever. And I'll always say, no matter what you're selling to anybody, if it's at an industrial paint company or you have selling IT or MarTech solutions, I always say, if you're in the elevator with the CFO for 30 seconds, what are you going to say? And it's going to be around revenue, around cost, around competitive advantage, maybe staying out of jail if it's for compliance. And just seeing Kevin Scannell up there, we're all disciples of Jeff Goldberg, rest his soul, as well. And but kind of there's so much I think that really are the same, which really comes through in the book. Not to keep plugging the book. And then I think things that are different is just the whole automation. I was on a call this morning with Bill Hogan, who's likewise a contributor in the book and CRO at Security Scorecard. And we went through his tech stack, and we went through, I think there's probably 20 or 25 kind of different software packages or apps that are being used. So I think it's the big change is just the enablement that technology has allowed in terms of just pure productivity. You have a gong with inspection, with hearing on sales calls and calls, how people are doing. And you just take LinkedIn alone, right? You can go to any person today that you and I are going to go see or talk to. There's going to be a laundry list of people that we have in common, and of which there's going to be at least a handful or more that we both know well. So getting that credibility, and the list goes on and on. But I think it's the big change is just the leverage and the power in the technology. What do you see? Well, I love Kevin used the word in his chat there, Kevin Scannell, likability, which you talked about, but and then you also echoed credibility. And I think it's so important. And I think all of these sales tools and the tech stack and sales gives the rep the ability to be even more credible, because he or she should know their customer better, more quickly. They should understand their products in a deeper way. And it allows you, if you're really good, to simplify the sales process. And that's exactly what Kevin talked about. So, I really like that word, credibility. I see Eric's question about managing reps doing all the right things, but still not making quota. That is a real hard one. Randy, what are your thoughts? So you have a salesperson and, they're working hard. They know the product. They're really committed to the company, but they're not hitting the number. What do you do? So I'm going to go on a limb here, and it might be controversial, but I would argue you could have a rep that's 300% of quota, could be on a performance plan, and you could have another rep that's maybe 75% of quota and not on a performance plan. And I'll talk about performance plan as in if you don't, you have to do ABC to get fired. And the reason is if you have somebody 300% of plan and they happen to get a bluebird, but they're not doing all the right things, that person I don't think anywhere near as highly of as if you've got another person who's doing all the right things and they just haven't gotten any breaks in order to get deals. But if you peel the onion back one layer further, and there's, again, a lot of great feedback about this in the book, is, okay, objectively, how are you measuring? How are you performance managing? So how are you setting expectations? So if the person's doing all the right things, you've got all the right criteria around the knowledge, the partnering, the relationships, the pipeline, the proposals, the value selling, you can go through all the different profile and criteria. And I would argue that if you have that in place and you're measuring people effectively, that means they are doing all the right things and they will be making quota, if you follow that.
Yeah, no, I do. And I agree with you. And I would say, just add to Eric's comment and question. I think if you're the manager or the leader, supervisor, whatever, of that person, and you believe they're doing all the right things, then I think it's your job as the manager to make that person successful, right? And you need to invest. And I think that's a difference between, I'll call it leadership and management. Management, you can say you're not making quota, gone. A leader says you're doing the right things, and I'm going to spend time maybe tweaking something to make you even better and get you to that, promised land of hitting quota, month by month, quarter by quarter. And that's the kind of leaders that I would encourage young people to go work for, and go seek out those leaders that are going to help them, not just manage them. There's a difference there. It's a subtle difference, but I think an important one. So I love the question. Jesse, Randy, since maybe you have the one of the most impressive networks of anyone I've ever known, just talk about the importance of the network in your career, and maybe then a little bit how that may change in this remote, distributed, global world that we're playing in today.
Yeah, well, it's a huge compliment coming from you, because I'd say yours rivals anybody. But thanks for the question, Jesse. I think it comes back to the relationships and know me, like me, trust me. So, a lot of times, we'll get pinged on LinkedIn. I just want to connect. I want to network. I'm like, okay, well, you have to be kind of, adding some value. So, we both have great networks, but I think it's really because we've, given so much, and you're not giving because you want to get. You're just giving just because that's kind of how we're wired in order to help people. So I would say, when we're in our 20s, we didn't set out to say we're going to have all these great relationships, we're going to have this massive network. But I think for both of us, it just happened to work out that because we did the right thing for, customers and for partners and for friends and for people that work for us, for people we work for. Because of that, you have a strong network, and therefore you have great relationships. Yeah, you can leverage it to help yourself, selfishly or personally. But I think at the end of the day, you're doing it just to kind of be a good person and help out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you said something in there that made me it's got to be a two-way street. I was reflecting on a mutual friend we have, Greg Brown, who's the CEO of Motorola Solutions. I've known Greg for about 22 years. And I remember he came to my class at Boston College as a guest. He was a terrific guest. And he told the students, be an energy giver, not an energy taker. And he said, most people are energy takers. Yeah. And it dovetails into your comment. As you're building your career, your network, you have to give something. You can't just take. And so that means like be prepared. Go back to Kevin's comment of likability and credibility. But really being I always use the word, I know, Randy, you know this, the go team. Like be present, be interested, not interesting. That's another Greg Brown comment. So those all things relate into this idea of building the network. Yes, you have the go team mug.
So, for those that aren't investors yet in Amity Ventures, you should.
I love it, Randy.
You got the go team.
I love it. I love it.
And Greg Brown, fantastic leader. Also was kind enough to give a testimonial in my book. Yep.
So Randy, maybe talk about what's next for Sales Community. Where are you taking this?
Great question. We're just continuing to go and grow. I'd say I'm really impressed with the content. Tucker and Jesse have been great partners in crime, and the content, I think what we have, how we have, it's great. And I think it's really just continuing to get the word out with the book. I think that will help, but there's just, so much fantastic content on there. We do the weekly podcast, which you were kind enough to do with us a while back, where you get to, hear different leaders. We have some great content from Tony Jeary around things that are less about sales, more about kind of just developing your whole self. But most importantly, have a fantastic library of just, kind of best in class resources, almost like the, old school, cards. So you can look up interviewing, you can look up remote selling, you can do a search on account-based marketing, you can do a search for, LinkedIn and how to leverage LinkedIn. Then, a whole bunch of great information comes up. So I think it's hard in today's day and age where everybody's, so busy and so running around. But again, when we were growing up, you kind of, carve out that time. So for those that are, selling, that want to learn more, that want to sell more, I'd say just continue to access sales community. And then being a community, most importantly, having the, the feedback and the discussions and people asking questions. If people ask questions, you've got a whole resource of fantastic people that can that can answer back. So I think a lot of great things going forward.
Yep. Randy, I was just, on your kind of your weekly Ask Me Anything, you've had so many awesome people, CEOs, CROs, CMOs. Is there anything that stood out in any of the things, the conversations you and Noor had with these with so many great leaders that you sort of, really resonated with you?
That is a great question. I think it's just I'd say just kind of, humility. I think it's just I always learn, we're talking about before, just helping people. But I think, the more the help, the more by really kind of giving, you also receive, just in terms of, learning and knowing, what to do and how to do it, and just, other, tips and tricks, which I think are great. So Tucker, I think we had, we got Tucker helping us behind the scene here. If you can bring Kevin Scannells back, because we should just acknowledge whatever.
Bring it back up.
So he said, sometimes good people, not to be confused with good salespeople, never get lucky, don't always pull for someone that you like, but rather those who execute instead. That's the stuff we hate, but why we're chosen to lead. Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Kevin. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think Kevin's, it's a great comment. It's, there are tough decisions and tough calls. And for me, those have always been the most gut wrenching, when you have someone who's a good person, but is not getting the job done. And that you do have to make tough calls in business. That's why, this also could be controversial. I prefer in thinking about a company, and Kevin's coming to me think of this, is thinking it's more around a team than a family. Because in a team, you choose your team.
Yep.
In a family, you don't. And it's a different type of love. I think you have to love your team, but it's still a team. And teams, and you know this, Randy, because you have kids who are great athletes. At the end of the day, teams have to win. And companies have to win, or else they go away. And it's a super competitive, world. But I think, there are some tough calls that we all have to make as business leaders. So thanks for sharing that, Kevin.
Yeah. And you take that analogy further, maybe inappropriate these days, so I apologize, but I always will use an analogy. Okay. The old days on a Viking ship, right? They're rowing away. If somebody's not carrying their weight, back then they're probably going to get tossed overboard. So, in a similar vein on sales, the benefit is with sales is that you're hopefully giving that open communication and feedback along the way. And I think the worst thing to have happen, I've come onto teams where all of a sudden, everybody knows so-and-so is bad and they're not on any plan. Nobody's ever communicated with the person. Nobody's ever coached the person. So I said, okay, that's not the person's fault. It's kind of company culture fault. So make sure you give the feedback and coach in a month or two, a short period of time. Person steps up, great. If they don't, then they know it. So making sure that, where there are those gut-wrenching calls, I'd say more times than not, people are going to know what direction things are going, and they're going to know that you're being fair. So all the more reason, if you know the person or it is family or whatever the relationship is, if it is close, you have to be that much more open and forthcoming with your feedback and what they need to do different and better to improve and to sell more and to keep their job.
And Randy, how does this change those types, kind of, I'll call it performance management in this distributed world where you don't have, I always think of my bosses, we might sit down after a day of sales calls or a day of meetings, and then they would give me critiques. Does that change, or how does it change?
Yeah, I think it makes it all the more urgent that you have to do it real time, right? So you don't have the benefit if you're in the car for a day and then you say, okay, let's go for a drink, and then you kind of do the rehash and go through. You're kind of bouncing around between lots of different people and different things. So you have to kind of create that culture environment where people are expecting, okay, let's take an extra 5 minutes and see what could we have done different or better, either from a performance management skill set, but more importantly, just collectively as a team for the opportunity or whatever we have going on. So I'd say it's probably all the more important to do it, more quickly and promptly. And if you let it wait a week or two, which a lot of people want to do because they want to avoid the conflict, then it's really a lost opportunity. Yeah.
And maybe, Randy, sort of related to this kind of lost opportunity comment, how do when you're working with companies, how do you really help them or ensure that they're really, whatever words you want to use, sales driven, customer driven, market driven, and really have an external view versus an internal, maybe product centric view? Both are critical, but how do you see that as you're guiding companies you're working with?
Yeah, it really starts at the top, and we've both seen companies that are and are not. Typically, if I were to stereotype, if it's an engineering-led founder CEO, unless it's somebody like a Moshe, they're probably not going to be wired with that DNA. But it really starts at the top, leading by example. And go back to the EMC days, we had Dick Egan, Roger Marino, who taught us it's all about the customer, and the whole company has to be focused on the customer and kind of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I guess it's possible as a sales leader that you can come in and have maybe the sales teams be sales focused, but you need to have, finance needs to know if they're legal, right? If they're kind of being a pain in the ass around, contracts, it's upsetting customers. They need to know how to be fair. If you're in, product management, you just can't be in your own cocoon. You need to be talking to customers to say, okay, here's what we're thinking about features. What do you want? What's a roadmap? What can we do and how we can do it? How can we do it? So it's really, truly everybody in the company, needs to be customer centric. And, one of the classic, best examples ever, Maureen Egan, Dick Egan's wife, was the receptionist at EMC and Natick. So customers that would come in for briefings or anything like that, she was that first point of contact. She was that first, warm and fuzzy around making everybody feel great. So, I'd say it's, it may start with the CEO, but it's got to go all the way down to, not to be down, but, relationship, the receptionist or, whoever in the company.
Yeah. No, yeah, it does have to feel good. And it kind of, I see Jesse's question. Jesse's question is, I love to buy, but hate to be sold. What does it say about the modern sales process, and how do we get out of the way so customers can buy stuff? I love it. What are your thoughts there, Randy?
Yeah, really good question. So I guess, first of all, salespeople love to be sold, and salespeople, I think, love to buy. But put that as an aside. I think in today's day and age, if you think about the whole, product-led growth, momentum in sales, that's something where I don't want to say it really kind of sells itself, but really does sell itself if it's great product market fit. And then, people lower in the stack can go ahead and really do the buying. And it could be unique for Jesse, but I would still argue that I would disagree. I think people still like to be sold, and it's not that you're selling like a Willy Loman or kind of old school, but the selling really is more listening, it's understanding, it's figuring out how you can provide value. So I look at selling not as much as, hey, I'm going to go sell you, but more of you're genuinely helping somebody. And if I go back to the elevator ride with the CFO around, if you're selling something, if you already sold something, if you're trying to get ideas going, what are you doing to help them generate revenue, save money, get a competitive advantage? Because any of those things are great for the company, great for the shareholders, and great for that person that you're selling to. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I like Jesse's question. I do think, and this goes back to, Walter talking about the hand, having, the hand you're dealt. I think you have to, as a salesperson, the product has to be awesome. Now, the customer may not know it's awesome, so your job is to articulate, listen, articulate why it's awesome. But I'll think about like companies, like we're investors in a company called SNYK, SNYK.
Yep.
And that, in fact, the CEO contributed to the book, Randy Peter McKay, who's a mutual friend and colleague of ours. But their product and the community they've built with developers is incredible. The product's incredible, the community's incredible, and then customers want to have enterprise support, so the salespeople help the customers get more value out of the product. So, maybe to Jesse's comment, I don't think the customer's not being sold, the customer is being delighted, and that's where And I was thinking yesterday, I had lunch with an old friend, John Clavin, in Boston, and the woman who was our waitress was a woman named Rose, and I had never met Rose, but she was absolutely delightful. And I usually don't get dessert. She didn't sell me dessert, but I just wanted to talk to Rose more, so I bought a dessert because the experience was delightful. And I think the salesperson's job is to make the experience for the customer delightful. That's how I think about it. And I thought about Rose yesterday because she made that hour lunch with my friend John delightful. That's the salesperson's job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was totally agree with that. And you said you have to have a great product. One of Jesse's contributions in the book, I think, was something around saying it needs to be maybe a 9 out of 10. So it doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles, but just kind of needs to be good enough, which is a great point. And earlier on, Frank Rausch had a comment, and Frank also had a great contribution in the book around, partnering. And we haven't talked about that, but, in today's tech stack, having be able to leverage, I'll say a variable cost model where they may have partners, channel partners, resellers, integrators, ISVs may have unique relationships. They may have unique skill sets. They could have, agreements in place with some of the large banks that then help, it helps you sell more. But, partnering is also a common theme that Frank had a great write-up. Greg Ambelos, from Dell likewise, with some great tips there.
Maybe in the kind of spirit of tips, Randy, what is your tips for getting out of the gate strong?
You got to see Ken's comment. See that?
I love it. Kenny, Kenny talked about hiring Rose for customer success. I would hire Rose for customer success. Rose was kind enough to share, because it was my birthday, as Randy mentioned yesterday, and Rose's birthday is coming up next week. And I asked Rose what she was doing for her birthday, and she was going to Gloucester for lobster, because that is her fondest memory of her youth. And I always, going back to delight your customer and fond memories. And I have such fond memories of working with Kenny. But what I was asking you, Randy, about was, how do you get out of the gate? How do you get your salespeople out of the gate strong? How do you get up to speed quickly? And I know it's training, it's onboarding. It's so important. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So again, another great topic in the book, and one of my best practices, just what I call a traditional, fast start plan, which I think a lot of people don't have, but it's kind of a 30, 60, 90-day plan where you have agreement with your manager. So whether you're a CRO and it's just CEO, or you're an SDR with your manager, to say, what are the besides just, selling, which you may or may not sell in the first 3 months, but, what are those subjective and objective behaviors that I need to hit kind of in the first month? Where do I need to be the second month? Where do I need to be the third month? So if you think about training, think about relationships in the company, think about product knowledge, think about your pipeline, thinking about proposals, all those behaviors will lead to success. And I'd argue if you have a great, tight 30, 60, 90-day plan, then after 3 months, you're ready for success. And, more times than not, a lot of the companies that we both deal with, you don't really see that. And I think the individual really gets, totally hurt if you think about the whole, onboarding process. To a lot of companies, onboarding is, okay, here's old days, you'd say, here's how you can find the coffee in the bathroom, but I guess you can't do that because you're not as much face-to-face anymore. But, getting the insurance cards and all this other stuff done. But it's really figuring out how can you really be set up for success. And then I also see a lot of times these days, you have the SDRs, they're all, chomping at the bit. Hey, now I want to get promoted, want to do this, want to do that. And I say, well, what's your manager telling you need to do? Like, well, nothing. Well, there's got to be something. So you got to work on the performance culture of the company. Why don't you be a leader to say, look, here's the profile, here's things that you need to do in order to be successful, in order to move up. So that concept of fast starting and success is not only in your first 90 days, but is, kind of ongoing going forward in the process.
Yep.
What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, no, I think, and I see Patrick Scranton's question, and Patrick is a dear friend, and he leads a team at Salesforce focused on the MedTech segment. And Patrick and I always talk about this of really kind of a business-minded sales approach. And his question was around finding and developing sales talent, specific on enterprise technology, and maybe how the world's changing in Patrick's view from, kind of relationship minded, which is still important, but now in this kind of virtual or distributed world where, it's really demonstrating business knowledge. He uses the word credibility to really help your client. So give some thoughts there, Randy, on this kind of idea of being a business-minded salesperson. What does that mean to you?
Sure. And even I think more directly, there's been some people writing up, he says, the death of McKinsey. But a lot of these consulting companies really were those business consultants that companies would hire. And I think Patrick's great point is you really need to have that mindset in the company. You don't need to go outsource it. So yeah, you have the relationships, but you really need to be that consultant. So if you are selling, go back to the Captivate IQ we talked about before, okay, maybe a commission SaaS platform, but you need to be consultative around, compensation, how are they motivating? What are they doing? Which, yeah, that leads into the, bits and bytes of that commission platform that they're using. And that may or may not be a good example, but, certainly as you have, higher level solutions, if you're, in Oracle and you're doing ERP or you're, kind of some startup, what is that business awareness? What's the consulting? What's the value add that you're providing? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, one of the ways I was trained, and many of us were trained around, and I still think about it today when I'm looking at diligencing companies to invest in, is what's the kind of financial impact, what's the operational impact, and what's the business impact?
Yep.
And I think that gets at the core of Patrick's comment, his question is, I think the best salespeople, can take their product, and many of these products that we're all working on are highly technical products, but really understand what's the ROI, but then deeper, how is it going to fit into the organization? And then how is it going to really drive value for the customer? And I think those companies that can demonstrate business impact and the salespeople that can demonstrate business value and articulate as a business person are the ones that are going to really crush their quota and impact the company and impact their customers. So I love Patrick's question. I love his mindset, and I love the hand he has at Salesforce. So it's a great question, Patrick. Maybe, Randy, in our remaining time, because I want to be respectful of your time, Randy, and all of our friends listening there, is talk a little bit about, and I know Tony talks about this too, and sort of goal setting and designing your life, and how that, how it's all intertwined into your career, your journey, and how maybe you might share some thoughts for the younger set who are listening in.
Yep. And then I just want to make sure we get to Tucker. Can you, I think we had a question from Joe Flanagan, and he was kind enough to post that in Sales Community. I think it's around companies doing training in a virtual world, which is a really great question. And his co-family has come up a few times the past couple of weeks, but I think the days where you kind of sit in a classroom, obviously you can't do that now because of COVID. So obviously you have to do online, but doing it around these live classes, seems to be seems to be the common sense way to do it. And it's more of, kind of a couple hours at a time as opposed to, several hours and having that interaction. And there's a partner sales community, Sales Impact Academy, that has a great way to do this. So just giving them a little bit of a shout out. So Joe, thanks for posting the question in Sales Community. Sorry, Peter, go back. What was the question again?
Yeah, I was talking about, as we finish here today, Randy, just talking a little bit, maybe a little bit broader than just sales and the network, the career, but talk a little about this, how to designing your life, personal goal setting, and those types of things that relate to all of our lives, professional lives, but also more broadly our journey and as human beings.
Yes, great question. So any business has a business plan, has goals and objectives, but how many times do we see people that kind of don't do that for their own lives? We had the benefit of, rest his soul, Frank Ladwig, who did a fantastic class on personal selling, and yourself, John Clavin, and others have done a great job carrying on his flag. But he had something called 7 sides around doing your goaling, around your personal, around your financial, around your health, around your physical, around your spiritual, a couple of others I can't rattle off right now. And what I do, and actually I have it in the book for my personal goals from last year. My family thought it was a little weird, but have it in there anyway. Around kind of what were my goals for last year and how do I set it up. And as you know, I do that pretty religiously every year. And then I've got some other goals that I have kind of before I die type goals, of which doing the book was certainly one of them. But I think everybody, you need to be deliberate in terms of what you want to do, what's your goal setting, and you also need to aim high. So, it's okay to aim high and not necessarily get there, but I think you need to be deliberate around what those things are. And by setting those goals and by sharing them, I get a lot of reward from it because it holds me more accountable. And then one of the things in doing the goals in terms of what you want to do also helps to reinforce what are the things that you don't want to do. So Chris Lynch has something in here around the power of saying no. But knowing what you don't want to do or don't have time to do is likewise just as important. But in summary, goal setting, just like it is for a company, is absolutely vital for every individual. And I know you're a believer as well.
100%. Randy, someone just texted me separately that is listening in, and they said, I want to get the book. And then they said, I want to buy this book for everyone in on my sales team. And I know they have about 500 people on the sales team. So how do people get the book, Randy?
There you go. Hopefully it's been posted on here. Great question. So you can go to salescommunity.com/book. It is on Amazon, but our landing page will make things, I think it's easier, faster, better. There's going to be more inventory there. And a little trick, if there are multiple, I was talking to Bill Hogan from Security Scorecard this morning. He's going to get, I think, 150 for his team. But you have to go into the cart if you want multiple copies. If you do the Apple Pay or any of that stuff, I think right now it kind of hard codes you just to one book. So salescommunity.com/book. And on the landing page, you can scroll down. You can see more information about it. You can see some of the great testimonials that we're fortunate enough to get for it.
Great. Wow. I love Shannon's comment there. Love it.
Imagine this session times 100.
Love it.
Advisors. Awesome. Thank you, Shannon.
Well, Randy, I've loved chatting with you. I love the book. And thank you for sharing a copy with me early. Is there maybe anything, Randy, kind of as we, finish hopefully a great month for everyone and hopefully a great quarter. Any parting comments, Randy, before we sign off?
Sure. I won't share it because you have to get the book, but we also have a fantastic sales IQ assessment. So if anybody wants to see how they stand up or what they need to work on, again, whether you're an individual contributor on up to a CEO. But Peter, really appreciate your time to do this and your friendship and your help over the years. And for everybody listening, hopefully you get a lot out of the book. Feel free to get any feedback, and always happy to help in any way we can. So salescommunity.com/book. And everybody have a great 4th of July weekend as well, I guess, too, right?
Happy 4th, Randy. Great job. I love chatting with you. Have a great afternoon.
All right, great. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
See ya.